I'd like to welcome you all to the third Appalachian Energy Summit. My name's Lori Gonzalez, and I serve as the provost on the campus of App State. I'd like to share with you a video from our chancellor, who has the misfortune of having to be in Italy right now. So this is from our brand new chancellor, Dr. Sherry Everts.
Good evening, and welcome to the third Appalachian Energy Summit. I'm Sherry Everts, Chancellor of Appalachian State University, and I'm honored to bring greetings to each of you and to recognize the importance of this initiative. The summit provides opportunities for professional engagement with colleagues from across the state, a model for collaboration, and a real and powerful path to a more sustainable future for higher education in North Carolina. The work accomplished through this initiative has garnered national attention, and we're proud to join with you, our colleagues across the state, in developing policies and procedures that will benefit our state for years to come. Appalachian prepares students to lead purposeful lives as engaged global citizens who understand their responsibilities in creating a sustainable future for all. Indeed, the important work accomplished through this initiative not only benefits our institutions, but also engages our students in real-world research that yields meaningful results. At Appalachian, we work diligently to keep three facets of sustainability in mind as we go about meeting our mission. One, is the action economically sustainable? Two, with our commitment to take care. And three, is the action equitable for the people with whom we share the planet? Sustainability at Appalachian is not a trend, it is a tradition. One has only to look at programs like the Renewable Energy Initiative. REI is a student-led effort funded by a fee proposed and voted upon by our students. I am pleased to be recording this message in Appalachian Hall, one of Appalachian's newest buildings under consideration for LEED certification and part of the Brad and Carol Wilson Honors and Engagement Community. Summit Hall, the residence hall connected to this building, hosts a commercial-scale solar thermal system funded by REI. This example of campus innovation is just one of many on our campus and on campuses across the state. I commend you for your leadership in sustainable energy and for the work you do each day to move this initiative forward. Such commitment to research, creativity, innovation, and practice is making a difference now and for our future. Thank you for your tireless efforts and for being a critical part of this amazing and beneficial collaboration.
So I'm very pleased that Dr. Everts was able to give you this heartfelt welcome. And what I want you to know is we see in Chancellor Everts a leader that will ensure that Appalachian State continues to live its commitment to sustainability. So I'm really pleased to welcome you to this third event, the keynote event. Appalachian State has as a core value the responsibility to educate our students to care for the planet and its people. We're so pleased to be able to host this event in the beautiful high country of Western North Carolina, and we couldn't have had a more beautiful day for you to sit inside all day. But what I want you to know is that our work here matters. It matters to our students. It matters to our state and our world. We offer our warmest welcome to all the summit participants, and I want to welcome my colleagues from sister institutions within the University of North Carolina system, as well as our valued business partners and our community from the high country. We offer special welcome to our partners from North Carolina private schools who show such great leadership in the area of sustainability. We have colleagues from Catawba College, Davidson College, Duke University, Elon University, Lenore Ryan University, and you might have noticed some red t-shirts. I think they're from Wake Forest University. Oh, and Winston-Salem State. Winston-Salem State and Warren Wilson College. So the Energy Summit is about charting the sustainable energy future for the University of North Carolina system, but also for the entire state. Our goal is to seek $1 million in savings over 20 years, and those are funds that we can use to meet the academic and the core mission of the university. But to achieve this lofty goal, we need to come together to share ideas, to talk about barriers, to look at innovations, and to hear from national leaders. And we'd like you all to visit sustain.appstate.edu to learn more about the summit and all the action plans of the universities. But it's really in the other goals of the summit that we find the true long-term benefits of our work. We seek to educate our students to be leaders and innovators of the tomorrow that we all seek. If we're successful in meeting our energy reduction goals, but we don't educate students to embrace sustainability as a core value, I believe we will have missed an opportunity to change our world. We will work to transform the energy economy of North Carolina into an emerging, vibrant, and verdant clean energy economy, thus making North Carolina the national leader. We hope to position the University of North Carolina system as national leaders in educating others about energy future and sustainability practices. And we're committed to create a culture of sustainability on our campuses that model to our students and our communities, not just our commitments, but our actions to create a more just and sustainable future. Appalachian State's strategic plan was approved in March, and we're in the process of implementing the strategic directions. We titled this plan The Appalachian Experience, Envisioning a Just and Sustainable Future, and we'll use it to renew and strengthen our commitment to sustainability. Our plan is built on the framework of sustainability and will focus on energy, environment, economics, and social justice. We think we have the chance to transform our campus and educate students to become global citizens who understand their responsibilities in creating a sustainable future for all. Tonight, you're going to hear from the president of the University of North Carolina, President Tom Ross. He serves as a leader of the nation's finest public institution, and he has shown a deep commitment to the environment and to issues of sustainability throughout his career. We appreciate his leadership on this and on many things in higher education, and we thank him for all of his efforts on behalf of higher education in North Carolina. Mr. David Ellion from CRE will offer remarks after President Ross. He currently serves as Vice President, Corporate Marketing and Business Development for CRE. Prior to assuming his current role, David played various leadership roles in CRE's lighting business, which he joined in 2011. CRE has graciously agreed to sponsor this keynote address, and I don't know if you noticed, but some pretty good food that we all enjoyed. So we thank them for their support and for their dedication to sustainable technology. David, I think that applause was really for your lighting and not just for the food, okay? So. We're really so fortunate to have Mr. Amory Lovin, Senior Scientist of the Rocky Mountain Institute, as our keynote speaker. He's been a part of this summit in its planning and since its inception, and we've all enjoyed his past two keynote addresses, and we're looking forward to his remarks tonight. Following the keynote address, you'll hear from a panel of experts who represent a unique mix. Amory Lovins is our first panelist. We like to view him as the top technical and policy guru of America, and we also like to think of him as an honorary Appalachian mountaineer. Our second panelist is David Orr, perhaps the leading figure on academic integration of sustainability principles. He is the Paul Sears Distinguished Professor of Environmental Studies and Politics and Senior Advisor to the President at Oberlin College. He is the Executive Director of the Oberlin Project and a founding editor of the journal Solutions. And we round out the panel with President Tom Ross. The panel will be moderated again by our own Jeff Ramsdale. He's a professor in the Department of Technology and Environmental Design and director of the Appalachian Energy Summit. And we're proud to say he was recently selected as the first fellow to the American Council on Education from our campus, and really fortunate to have him here at Appalachian. It's important that we mention that this entire conference, the meals, and the lodging is free for all and is made entirely possible by our very generous benefactors and industry sponsors. And I want to take a moment to recognize what I think of as the man behind the summit, Mr. Jed Moody, the director of our Appalachian State Office of Sustainability, and he's the person that really brings a passion and skill to this event. So thank you, Jed. We really hope you enjoy this meeting and leave more deeply committed to this quest than when you first entered the auditorium. We have a lot of work to do, but together I think we can be successful. Now please join me in welcoming President Tom Ross.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'll tell you, it's always good to be an Appalachian, but, you know, I was so impressed with Chancellor Everts. Not necessarily tonight, although that was impressive, but when I was really impressed with her is when I interviewed her. And she already knew Appalachian. She knew how important sustainability was on this campus. She knew about what the students had done to tax themselves in order to create sustainability projects. She knew about the solar house, the Decathlon house, winning the People's Choice Award up in Washington. She knew all that stuff. And she knew a little bit about Appalachian football. So I figured this lady, she can run this place. And I think she's going to be a terrific chancellor. I'm glad you got to at least see her on video. If you haven't had a chance to meet her, I hope you will. You'll find her terrific. I want to thank Provost Lori Gonzalez for her gracious welcome tonight to all of us and the work that she does here at Appalachian. We couldn't have this summit without her, and we thank her and all of the other staff here at Appalachian for what they do. And I particularly want to thank them for having water up here. Water in glasses. So, somebody's calling me. That's my signal to tell you to turn off your cell phones. How about that? Pretty good deal, huh? So, I had that planned, just so you know. Now, so here's the thing about water. This is why students need to be involved. How many students are here tonight? Good, a lot of you. That's great, considering it's the middle of the summer. So some of you know that before I ever got into higher education, I ran a private foundation, and we did a lot of work in the environments. I first met Fred and Alice Standback, and I know of their great work throughout North Carolina and all over the country. But and thank them for their part tonight. So I left that job after I'd done a lot of work in that area, and I went to Davidson College to get involved in higher education. And, you know, I didn't think a whole lot about the environment there. I was thinking about how was I going to deal with the faculty and how was I going to survive the students and all that sort of stuff. It wasn't a week, and a group of students came to see me, and they said, we want to get rid of bottled water on the campus. And I thought, you know, are they crazy? I mean, every alumni event we have big things of bottled water. We serve it in sporting events. I mean, how are we possibly going to do this? And they worked with us to develop a plan. And I used to carry around a bottle, a plastic bottle that used to have water in it, and I filled it a third of the way full of oil. And I'd take it around giving speeches about it, and I'd set it up there, and I'd say, this is how much oil it takes to make this bottle, and then dispose of it. And you know, slowly but surely, we built a lot of support on campus for getting rid of plastic bottles, and we did. And so it's great to see water in glasses. But the point is, it changed my entire outlook of what my role was as a college president on a campus. It was to listen to students and to help them carry out their activities, because they're the ones that are driving change in such positive ways. So to all the students here, thank you. Keep it up. Do not let up on your campus leadership. Really push them hard. Leave the people at the system like me alone, but really push those campus people hard. They deserve it. Listen, I can't start my remarks without taking just a minute more to thank Jed Moody because, and I appreciate Lori recognizing him and recognizing that this conference wouldn't happen without him, but it's really more than that. He has been what I think is the soul of this conference. He's gathered people from all over our system together, and they work hard during the year to develop a program and bring it to you. He has pushed people, including me, to get more of the leadership of our campuses here. When I look around today, and when I was at the leadership lunch earlier today, all of his work is paying off because we're hearing not about things that are being done for the first time, but we're learning from each other about things that have been going on at one campus for 3 or 4 years, and we're starting them at another. And we're passing along a lot of best practices and a lot of great ideas, and it's making a difference. I'm going to talk a little more about that in a minute. But before I do, in addition to Jed, who I personally really thank for this, he's a hero of mine for all of his work. There are a lot of other people that have made tonight possible, as Lori said, and I'm going to take a minute and name them because what they have done to stand behind this conference, it's one thing to sponsor a conference, but what they're really sponsoring is our work to make a difference in energy conservation, to make a difference in our environment, to make a difference in the sustainability of our institutions of higher education, and to make a difference in our world. And so they deserve to be mentioned. And I mentioned Fred and Alice Standback already. You talk about a heroine and a hero to North Carolina and to our environment. I can't name two that have done more in their lives for us than Fred and Alice. So thank you both so much for what you've done. And I'll tell you, Appalachian's got a lot of great alumni, but in my book, Keenan and Tracy Smith and Hayes and Susan Smith rank right up at the top. Because you talk about families that are committed to this institution and are committed to this conference. They have been sponsors, major sponsors for us from the very first day that we started planning this conference. And thanks to Keenan and Hayes and Susan and Tracy. Stand up, please, and let us recognize you. Stand up, stand up, stand up. Stand up. And so you've heard about Cree, and you've eaten their food and read by their lights, and we're deeply appreciative of what Cree has done and look forward to hearing David's remarks. Celtic Energy, House, which is a fascinating company that I heard about for the first time at lunch today. Pepco Energy Services, Johnson Controls, Aircuity, General Electric, and Granger have all been major sponsors for us. In addition to those sponsors, program and event support has been provided by Shift Equity, by Enterprise Zimrod, Hanson, Lamar Advertising, SAS, the NC Sustainable Energy Association, Northbridge Energy Partners, and Appalachian Voices. And with people representing those sponsors, please stand and let us thank you, please. How many conferences do you attend where everything's free? Right? It just doesn't happen without people like this, so we're so very thankful for them. And again, you're going to hear from Amory Levins, and he's going to be introduced, and I'm only going to say to you that he's not only the guru for the United States in energy conservation, he's the guru of the world. He is looked to more for advice, and this isn't just to give big fancy lectures. He goes in and hands-on and helps countries and companies figure out how to be more conscious of their energy usage and how to save huge amounts of money and conserve energy to make our planet a better place. He is the world's leader in this field. And for him to take time out of his schedule, and if you read his bio, which I know you've been provided, and you look at just the awards he's gotten all over the world, much less the places he travels, and realize that 3 years in a row he made his schedule work so he could be here with us. That is an incredible commitment. He's an inspiration to me, and if you care about these issues, he ought to be an inspiration to you. And Amory, thank you for being here. We deeply appreciate it. We thank David Orr from Oberlin College, who I knew in one of my old lives, and we're glad to see David again and look forward to his comments tonight. So this is a wealth of experience and knowledge here tonight and throughout this summit, and we're excited about learning from everyone who's here. We have more than 325 representatives from across the UNC system and from those private colleges and universities that Lori mentioned that are registered to be here this week. And I'm really pleased that we have representatives of every one of our 17 campuses. That is terrific for us to have everyone represented. Today at lunch, we had more than 25, actually close to 40 people at the lunch, but more than 25 chancellors, provosts, and chief financial officers from our system that took time out of their busy schedules to be here. And I'm going to tell you, this is a busy time for them. You might notice the legislature is still meeting in Raleigh, and so it's an important time for us in our budget and in every other way. But their presence here, I think, is a signal of their commitment to these issues and to the importance to the university that we figure out how to conserve energy and to be more sustainable. It's not just about doing the right thing. It is about being more efficient with our resources and being able to take those resources that we're now spending on energy and move them into the classroom where we can support our world-class faculty and provide opportunities for our students. So think of it as a money transfer proposition. We're saving it one place and investing it in the right places for the future of our state. So. Now, we have some challenges in this state, in this country, and we have some challenges in the university system. And we have challenges with our water supply. We have growing challenges with demands for more and more energy. We are struggling to preserve our forests, our streams, our green space, and our way of life. And I was talking to a group of students earlier about fly fishing and what a wonderful enterprise it is. And why is it so wonderful, I said to them? Because you're always in a beautiful place, listening to the water run down, and it calms you. It is an experience that you should try if you haven't. But there are challenges in preserving that way of life. And as a public university, in my view, the University of North Carolina both has an opportunity and a responsibility to educate our 220,000 students as well as our 50,000 plus employees on the principles and practices of sustainability. It's critical to their future and it's critical to ours. Last year, our Board of Governors adopted a 5-year strategic plan that underscores our commitments to the people of North Carolina. One of the key areas is to focus on what we can do in energy-related research, analysis, instruction, and outreach. What can we do to make a real difference in figuring out how to use the energy that we have more constructively and with better conservation? But how can we lead a transformation from the kinds of non-renewable energies that we consume mostly today to more renewable energies that are better for our future? So we have to have a role in this, in my view. We have to take our responsibility seriously, and we have to be willing to work with private industry and with the nonprofit organizations that will lead us in making discoveries that will fuel our state and the world in the future. As I mentioned, the budget deliberations are still underway, and we're hopeful that we will receive funding for a targeted appropriation that we call part of our game-changing research efforts that will lead North Carolina's economy to the future. And one of those key areas is in energy, is looking at the production of renewable energy resources for us, and that's a critical piece of what we think will drive North Carolina's economy, is a clean energy economy. And so we're hopeful the legislature will support that. As I mentioned, this is not just about doing the right thing, although that always ought to come first. We spend more than $225 million a year on energy and water at the University of North Carolina. $225 million a year on energy and water. So when you leave out of here this week, I want you to know that I want you to be committed to helping us reduce this major expenditure. We know it can be done, and we know that there are a lot of small things we can do that will help us in significant cumulative ways. And let me give you a little proof, because we've been working on this for a while. And so in 2012-13, right, the last fiscal year that we have data for, which is, to say, 2012-13, the University of North Carolina avoided $75 million in energy cost in that 1 year through a variety of conservation and technical remediation efforts. Without any new capital investment or any of that, we avoided $75 million in energy costs by being smarter. That same year, we avoided an additional $16 million in water cost. Since 2002-03, up through 12-13, that 10-year period, we have avoided nearly $387 million in combined energy and water costs. $387 million. That's pretty good. We've cut energy conservation 25%, water conservation by 45%. But as Lori said, the goal of this summit and the goal that I have and that the University of North Carolina has is to save $1 billion over the next 20 years. So we're making progress. $387 million in 10 years is great. We got 20 years left. We got another 2/3 of $1 billion to save. You could say we're on path to do that, but I'm not sure we are. We got a lot more work to do. And if we can save more, that's more money we'll put in the classroom. And if we can save more, our environment will be better. So we got to do this. It's very important. We have, in addition to this work, we've engaged in 16 energy performance contracts across our system. And they're very helpful, and they have saved us money. But you know, it's a situation where we've tried to get some permission from the legislature to do even more of this work, and we struggle to get that permission. And so we need your support in helping us do that, because we believe we can do an even better job than we have already in long-term savings. We need capital to invest in what we're doing, and we need your ideas about how can we obtain the capital we need to make the investments up front in renewable energy that will save us in the long run. So there's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of good stuff happening on the campuses. The Energy Frontier Research Center for solar fuels at UNC Chapel Hill just recently received a nearly $11 million grant from the Department of Energy to advance emerging solar energy technologies and to turn them into devices that can efficiently produce fuels. This summer, UNC Asheville will install 112 solar panels on the roofs of Overlook Hall that they'll contribute back to the electrical grid. We'd like to do that a different way. We'll talk about that. Several campuses have installed rain gardens and cisterns. Many have revamped their transportation systems using electric vehicles or alternative fuels, including biofuels made from cooking oil in their dining halls. Just last month, this campus, Appalachian in Western Carolina, claimed top 10 spots in the 2014 Campus Conservation National Contest. Think of that, 2 in the UNC system in the top 10 in the country. So we're doing a lot of things right. And I think sometimes we get so consumed by dealing with the latest round of budget cuts or addressing the latest crisis of the day that it's easy to get distracted from the long-term issues. So this summit is about refocusing our efforts. It is about restarting yet again this important conversation. It is about taking our efforts to the next level, and it will require us to overcome some really difficult challenges. There are legislative restrictions on our ability to carry out, as I mentioned, our own energy conservation projects, and that increased the cost to us. There's little, if any, capital to invest in these projects, and that is compounded by the fact that we have $2.4 billion in backlogs of deferred maintenance. And as Amory pointed out today, we got that backlog of deferred maintenance. If we can get some capital for that, we can incorporate energy conservation measures at the same time, do it smartly, probably less expensively, and it will be great for the university. But we got to have funds for those R&R needs that we have. You may have read in the news media recently that George Washington University, an American university in Washington, D.C., that means they're not in North Carolina, I want you to understand that. They entered into an agreement, a 20-year agreement with Duke Energy to buy solar power generated from the northeastern corner of North Carolina at a fixed price for that 20-year period. That kind of long-term arrangement to provide clean energy meets more than half of both of those universities' needs while lowering their energy cost and helping them reduce their carbon footprints. For now, as I mentioned this in an editorial, and I thank Caroline Henley for her help with that, we said in this editorial that there are statutory restrictions that keep us from accomplishing some of these things in North Carolina. And so again, I think we need to be aware of those. We need to work together to figure out how can we change the law in a way that allows us to take full advantage of renewable energies and the power that they generate on our campuses. So we need your help thinking through those issues this week, and we'll need your help in talking with Duke Energy and with those that make policy in this state. So these are only a few of the big challenges we face. There are many more, and there are no easy answers. You know, we've kind of done the easy stuff. That's how we saved that $380-some million. But the hard stuff's yet to be done, and the hard stuff's where the real payoff will be. And yet, you know, I'm always inspired by Amory, but he said today that just talking about the difference in the technology that's available today versus 3 years ago, and how much change there's been. So that's why this summit every year is so important, because we can keep learning the new things as well. But I'm counting on you, because I don't have the wisdom or the ability or the know-how to do what needs to be done. But you do. There are people in this room that know the right answers. There are people in this room that are deeply passionate about these issues. I ask all the students to raise their hand, and I'm going to tell you, no one cares more about these issues than our students. And why is that? Because they see their future. And they see what it could be, and they see what they want it to be. And so listen to them, hear them, involve them. It's really important that they be at the table. We have, as I mentioned earlier, world-class faculty. I wish we could do more for them in compensation. They deserve it. They have been undercompensated for years with only a 1.2% pay increase in the last 6 years. That's not right. They are world-class, and they will find the solutions to this problem if we support them, and we have to do that. It's critical to our future. And Jed is the poster child, but we have fantastic staff on every one of our campuses, and you think our students and faculty know what to do. Our staff really get it, and they're the ones implementing it every day that are making a huge difference. So we owe all of them a tremendous debt, and I think we're in a position to make a real and lasting difference. I think we already have, but I think we can do much more. And I'm looking forward to hearing about the results of your thinking and your discussion that will take place this week. Your work is vital to our future. You need to be creative, you need to be innovative, you need to be focused, and maybe more than anything else, you need to be passionate, because that's what will drive change, and we need you to drive change. Thank you for making a difference.
Good evening, everyone. Again, I'm David Ellion, VP of Corporate Marketing Business Development from Cree Incorporated, proudly headquartered in Durham, North Carolina. Been a lot of remarks about our sponsorship of the reception this evening, and that was all done by design. this is, after all, the South, and there's an old adage that the way to a person's heart is through their stomach, right? So if you remember nothing else about us, remember the fine victuals that we served up during the sponsorship. And it's with distinct honor and pleasure that I represent the CRE team. We've been associated with the summit for as long as since its inception, and it probably behooves me to give you a little bit of background as to why we have been associated and continue to be associated with the summit. And we're terribly excited this year about the theme, disruption and innovation, because we think as CRE, as a disruptor and innovator in the lighting industry, we fit right in. We're a kindred spirit when it comes to the idea of turning things on their head as a way to create value for enterprises as well as, the future, the generations in the future. But we've not only have the technology, manufacturer of LED lighting, a global manufacturer of LED lighting. We also have a lot of deep roots in this region. Some of the founders are actually from this region of North Carolina. In fact, I think one of the founders, their parents were professors here at App State for many years. For many of you that don't know, CRE, we have our garage story. We were started by 5 NC State graduate students who were in material science about 27, 28 years ago. And they basically bootstrapped the company to the company that it is today, a $2 billion enterprise that's leading this transition in solid-state lighting. But apart from having that geographic association, we like to have the opportunity to interact with leaders, people that are committed and passionate and that are persevering in a shift in mindset and technology in terms of how energy is consumed and used in our society today. And I want to thank the organizers and the people that put this together and the people we had the opportunity to interact with, whether it was Jed or Randy or Keenan. But I also want to thank you for taking the time to attend and the leadership that you demonstrate in your everyday job. It's real easy for me as a manufacturer of a technology to show up on your doorstep and to sell our wares. But I know within your own organizations and within your own institutions, you have to work hard every day to be creative, to deliver distinctive impact on your environment with a lot of constraints. As kind of was remarked earlier, there's a lot of challenges and speed bumps that you navigate every day to deliver distinctive impact. And what I would tell you is keep doing it. Clearly sustainability and energy efficiency is gaining momentum, but we're still a long way away from getting full penetration and adoption of technologies in the places where they belong. You can read a lot of stories about the solar cities of the world, the Teslas, the Stratosolars. Every day you can see a headline about a alternative energy or renewable energy company, but don't let that fool you in terms of the overall progress that we've made to date. There's still a lot to be done in terms of driving the technology. And then lastly, what I would say is, we at CRE, we embrace this disruption and innovation. As I stated earlier, it's the only way to get things moving. At the end of the day, you have to change people's mindsets to be able to change their behaviors. And in the industry that we lead and compete in, the lighting industry, there are century-old practices and literally century-old technologies. So you can imagine some of the inertia that we encounter as we try to get people to rethink lighting. And we recently introduced our first consumer product last year, the QLED bulb. And I'm not trying to make a pitch. We spent enough money on TV commercials to do that already. But part of the reason we launched the bulb is we look at the commercial markets and the pace at which they're moving, and we thought it was imperative that we also reach out to consumers, because everybody's a consumer first. And if we can demonstrate the value of our technology to you in your home, it doesn't take you that much of a mental leap to understand the value that we can create in the commercial workplace. So, hats off to you as you drive your journey of changing mindsets and leadership within your individual organizations, because I know how tough a challenge that is. But it's fun, because there's nothing like looking back at the impact that you've had, not just in the moment, but the impact that you've had for future generations as well. Now, turning to the introduction of this evening's esteemed speaker, Amy Lovins. I could have simply got a copy of Amy's biography and read it to you and recited it to you, but because he's been a featured speaker here for many years, I thought I'd take a little bit of a different approach, and I did a bit of research with the lens of disruption and innovation. And a lot of people have commented about how Amory is a sought-after guru in the space, and that's clearly true. Heads of state look to him for advice and counsel on how to build and execute sustainability programs. But one of the things that struck me about when I read about him and read about his research was how much of an emphasis he places on doing. And so if you think about Rocky Mountain Institute, it's not just a think tank, it's a think and do tank. And if you think about the disruption and innovation cycle, it's thinking of the great idea, but it's also applying it and learning from that application, irrespective of the challenges that you encounter as you go apply it. And I think that Amory embodies that. And I'm going to share a couple of quotes with you that I found really insightful, and actually share them with a lot of the executive team at CRE, because every now and then we need a little bit of inspiration ourselves, right? Because we're this $2 billion company, $2 billion company in North Carolina, but we compete every day against much larger companies that are great institutions, but that notwithstanding, we compete against them and they're much larger. So we always search for inspiration in terms of charging and driving forward with our mission. So to quote Amory, we've got 21st century technologies and speed colliding head-on with 20th and 19th century institutions, rules, and cultures. And I think in a lot of ways that sums up, some of the biggest challenges that we have, not just from a manufacturer perspective, but also within your institutions, within any institution. The technology is here. The technology to create substantial and sustainable value around energy is here, but the mindset isn't here yet. And so as you think about how you get to that mindset, it's not just about proffering the ideas, it's also about laying out a plan and also demonstrating impact so that you get people believing and shaping people's mindset and behavior on a go-forward basis. And I think what you do every day is a critical part of that. And so keep it up, keep driving, take it to a whole nother level, and drive for as high as aspiration as you can afford to drive for. And as you listen to Amory's comments, what I'm going to challenge myself to do, and what I would challenge you to do, is not just glean the insight, but think about how you're going to challenge yourself to do something about it, to take what you're doing to another level and apply, not just think, but also do when it comes to this critical space of energy and sustainability. With that, I'd like to turn over the podium to Amory.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for who you are and what you do and for coming tonight. This is the third time that you've given me the honor of addressing this summit. In 2012, I met many of the technical, economic, and organizational elements of the next 5/8, as it is now, of your journey to save $1 billion worth of energy and water costs. Congratulations on the first 3/8. In 2013, I enlarged that vision of wringing out every kind of waste, but also invited you to imagine a university where we escape, span, or demolish disciplinary silos. We cultivate beginner's mind. We fulfill higher education's unique obligation to play the long game and make the long bet. And we also practice and spread the public purpose and the rigorous insistence on quality that our students and their students must uphold if our society is to learn quickly and adapt gracefully in turbulent times. Now, in 2014, I want to zoom out even further and explore what it is that gets us up out of bed every morning. Each of us doing this work on energy and resources in higher education or elsewhere feels challenged every day by the enormity and difficulty of the task. Busting barriers, spreading innovation, rearranging our metal furniture, reminding our designers is not easy, or it would have been done already. Difficulty then sows doubts. Is the proverbial glass half full or half empty? Or is it twice as big as it needs to be? Is it further expandable by efficiency? Is it worth improving? But that improvement gets a lot harder if we are gnawed by doubt about whether we can ever succeed or are simply inadequate to the scope and scale of the task. Many of our students, too, are down about the state of the world. Some are in despair that we are the first self-endangered species. And you can't depress people into action. So I'd like to talk to you today, and especially to those students leading among us, about a kind of disruptive innovation that is not about technology or design or financing or implementation. It's much deeper and much more important than that. It's about our purpose, our attitude, and the spirit of our being. The early pioneer, Bill McClarney, was stirring a vat of algae in his Costa Rica research center when a brassy North American lady strode in. What, she demanded, was he doing stirring this green goo when what the world really needs is love? So Bill replied, well, there's theoretical love, and then there's applied love. And he kept on stirring. Many of us here stir and strive in the spirit of applied hope. We work to make the world better, not from some airy theoretical hope, but in the pragmatic and grounded conviction that starting with hope and acting out of hope can cultivate a different kind of world worth being hopeful about, reinforcing itself in a virtuous spiral. Applied hope is not about some vague, far-off future, but it's expressed and created moment by moment through our choices. Francis Moore LePay said, hope is a stance, not an assessment. But applied hope is not mere glandular optimism. The optimist, just like the pessimist, as David Brower taught us, treats the future as fate, not choice, and thus fails to take responsibility for creating the world we want. Applied hope is a deliberate choice of heart and head. David Orr says the optimist has his feet up on the desk and a satisfied smirk knowing the deck is stacked. The person living in hope has her sleeves rolled up and is fighting hard to change or beat the odds. Optimism can easily mask cowardice. Applied hope requires fearlessness. Now, fear of specific and avoidable dangers has evolutionary value. Nobody has ancestors who were not mindful of saber-toothed tigers. But pervasive dread, promoted by some who want to keep us pickled in fear, is numbing and demotivating. Sometimes when I give a talk, a questioner then details the many bad things happening in the world and all the suffering in the universe and asks, how dare I propose solutions? Isn't resistance futile? The only response I've found is to ask as gently as I can, yeah, I can see why you feel that way. Does it make you more effective? In a recent college class, one young woman bemoaned so many global problems that she said she'd lost all hope and she couldn't imagine bringing a child into such a world. But discussion quickly revealed to both of us that she had not lost hope at all. She knew exactly where she'd left it. To be sure, mood does matter. The last 3 decades of the 20th century reportedly saw 46,000 new psychological papers on despair and grief, and only 400 on joy and happiness. If psychologists want to help people find joy and happiness, they're looking in the wrong places. Empathy, humor, and reversing both inner and outer poverty are all vital, but the most solid foundation we know for feeling better about the future is to improve it, tangibly, durably, reproducibly, and scalably. So now is the time to be practitioners, not theorists, to be synthesis, not specialists, to do solutions, not problems, to do transformation, not incrementalism. Or as my mentor Edwin Land said, don't undertake a project unless it is manifestly important and nearly impossible. It's time to shift our language and action, as my wife Judy says, from somebody should to I will, and to do real work on real projects and go to scale. As that early activist, St. Francis of Assisi, said, preach the gospel at all times. If necessary, use words. In a world short of both hope and time, we need to practice Raymond Williams' truth that to be truly radical is to make hope possible, not despair convincing. Hope becomes possible, practical, even profitable, when advanced resource efficiency turns scarcity into plenitude. David White has a poem called Loaves and Fishes that captures that goal thus. He writes, "This is not the age of information. This is not the age of information. Forget the news and the radio and the blurred screen. This is the time of loaves and fishes. People are hungry, and one good word is bread for 1,000. So, with the world so finely balanced between fear and hope, with the outcome in suspense and a whiff of imminent shift in the air, let us choose to add the small, stubborn ounces of our weight on the side of applied hope. As the Zen master Goto Roshi put it, phrasing our task, infinite gratitude towards all things past, infinite service to all things present, infinite responsibility to all things future. This mission is challenging. It requires you to combine sizzle in your brain, fire in your belly, perseverance rooted like a redwood, soul as light as a butterfly. According to the internet, one Michael C. Muhammad said, everything works out right in the end. If things are not working right, it isn't the end yet. Don't let it bother you. Relax and keep on going. So in this tranquil but unwavering spirit of applied hope, let me tell you a story. In the early 1950s, the Dayak people in Borneo had malaria. The World Health Organization had a solution, spray DDT everywhere. They did. The mosquitoes died, the malaria declined. So far, so good. But there were side effects. Garrett Hardin said, side effects are the things you didn't think of, whose existence you will deny as long as possible. For example, the roofs of the houses started falling down on people's heads because the DDT had also killed teensy little parasitic wasps that previously had controlled the thatch-eating caterpillars, which then proliferated and munched up the roof thatching. So the colonial government addressed this problem by giving people sheet metal roofs, but the noise of the tropical rain on the tin roofs kept people awake all night. That didn't work. Meanwhile, the DDT-poisoned bugs were eaten by geckos, which were eaten by cats. The DDT built up in the food chain and killed the cats. Without the cats, the rats flourished and multiplied, and soon the World Health Organization was threatened with potential outbreaks of typhus and Sylvatic plague, which it would itself have created. And it was thereby obliged to call the Royal Air Force in Singapore and ask them to come conduct Operation Cat Drop, parachuting a great many, by one account 14,000 live cats into Borneo. We have, by the way, verified this with some of the elders in the Kalabit Highlands. Yes, that's what happened. So this story is our guiding parable at Rocky Mountain Institute, and it shows that if you don't understand how things are connected, then quite often the cause of problems is solutions. And most of today's problems are like that. We created them by trying to do just one thing in a world where you can't do just one thing because it's hooked to everything else. But we can harness those hidden connections so the cause of solutions becomes solutions. We can solve, or better still, avoid a problem in a way that solves or avoids a lot of other problems as well without making new ones before somebody has to go parachuting more cats. So join me in envisioning where these linked multiplying solutions can lead if we apply and extend what we've learned and move in. If the teachers here learn more from our brave and uninhibited students, and if we all take responsibility together for creating the world we want. You know, last year I asked you to imagine a university. Now let me ask you to imagine a world, a few short generations hence, a world where spacious, peppy, ultra-safe, 125 to 260 mile-a-gallon cars whisper through revitalized cities and towns, convivial suburbs, and fertile, prosperous countryside, burning no oil and emitting pure drinking water or nothing at all. Where sprawl is no longer mandated or subsidized, so stronger families eat healthy local food on front porches, and kids free of obesity, diabetes, and asthma play in thriving neighborhoods, where new buildings and plugged-in parked cars produce enough surplus energy to power the now efficient old buildings, and where our buildings make people healthier, happier, and more productive, creating delight when entered, serenity when occupied, and regret when departed. Imagine a world where oil and coal and nuclear energy have all been phased out, all vanquished by the competitors whose lower costs and risks have already enabled them to capture most of the world's market for new electrical services, energy efficiency, distributed renewables, combined heat and power, and optionally by small amounts of advanced biofuels that use no cropland and move carbon from air to tilth where it belongs, where resilient, right-sized energy systems make major failures impossible, not inevitable, where the collapse of oil's demand and price has defunded enemies, undermined dictatorship and corruption, and doused the Mideast tinderbox, where our advanced economy is no longer fueled at all by the rotted remains of primeval swamp goo and dinosaur dung, where energy policy is no longer a gloomy multiple-choice test. Do you prefer to die from A, climate change, B, oil wars, C, nuclear holocaust, or D, all of the above? We choose E, none of the above. Thank you very much. Imagine, therefore, a world where carbon emissions have long been steadily declining at a handsome profit because saving fuel costs less than buying fuel, where global climate has stabilized and repair has begun, and where this planetary near-death experience has finally made antisocial and unacceptable the arrogance that let cleverness imperil the whole human prospect by outrunning wisdom. Imagine a world where the successful industries, rather than wasting 99.98% of their materials, follow Ray C. Anderson's lead. They take nothing, waste nothing, do no harm, and do very well by doing good at the expense of less alert competitors. Where the cost of waste is driving unnatural capitalism extinct. Where service providers and their customers both prosper the same way by doing more and better with less for longer. So products become ever more efficient to make and to use. Where integrative engineering and biomimicry create abundance by design, and where elegant frugality turns scarcities and conflicts about energy and water and land and minerals into enough for all, forever. Imagine a world where the war against the earth is over, where we've stopped treating soil like dirt, where forests are expanding, farms emulate natural ecosystems, rivers run clean, oceans are starting to recover, fish and wildlife are returning, and a stabilizing, radically resource-efficient human population needs ever less of the world's land and metabolism, leaving more for all the relatives, all the partners in creation who give us life. Imagine a world where we don't just know more, we also know better, where over-specialization and reductionism have gone from thrillingly fashionable to unaffordably foolish, where Darwin finally beat Descartes, where wisdom across boundaries, vision across boundaries, triumphs simply because it works better and costs less. Imagine a world secure, free from fear of privation or attack, where conflict prevention is as normal as fire prevention, where conflicts not avoided are peacefully resolved through strengthened international laws, norms, and institutions. Failing that, where threatened aggression is reliably deterred or defeated by non-provocative defense that makes others feel and be more secure, not less. Where all people can be nourished, healthy, and educated, and where all know Dr. King's truth, that peace is not the absence of war. It is the presence of justice. Imagine a world where reason, diversity, tolerance, humility, and democracy are once more ascendant, where economic and religious fundamentalism are obsolete, where tyranny is odious, rare, failing, and dwindling, and where global consciousness has transcended fear to live and strive in hope, in applied hope. This is the astonishing world we're all gradually creating together. It's being built before our eyes by many of you and a myriad other world weavers. Gilbert and Libber Pinchot point out that brains are evenly distributed, one per person. So most of the world's brains are in the South, half are in the heads of women, most are in the heads of poor people. And as an emerging global nervous system and millions of new civil society organizations start to knit together that collective intelligence, the most powerful thing we know in the universe, innovation and collaboration are starting to overcome stagnation and squabbles. The search for intelligent life on Earth continues, but as we all strive to become much higher primates, some promising specimens are turning up just in time. Each of you here today. In their many ways, they're mobilizing society's most potent forces, businesses in mindful markets, and citizens in vibrant civil society to do what is necessary at this pivotal moment, the most important moment since we walked out of Africa, the moment when humanity has exactly enough time starting now. Each of you can choose, many of you have chosen, to be one of those unusual people who, with humor and courage, chutzpah and humility, eager enthusiasm and relentless patience, are composing their lives and combining their efforts to make it so. Here we are. And now, imagine the power of all of us together to make it so. Thank you.
Welcome again. I do not know how to follow that, let me tell you. Amory, thank you so much for those fantastic remarks. Very inspiring. I was already inspired by you, but it's gone over the top now.
Well, just to moderate that a little bit, I brought along some of the latest products of our
Cool Whip, you make craft Cool Whip in Colorado. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
Or
these
bananas.
are two of our latest high-altitude passive solar organic orangutan tinted Rocky Mountain bananas. We had 7 crops at once, so I got to get rid of them somehow, and this seemed to work.
I've been to Amory's house, and there truly is banana trees growing in Snowmass, Colorado. Let me tell you what.
With no furnace.
No furnace, right. My name's Jeff Ramstel. I'm very honored to be here again, moderating the panel session. Last year, we had a fantastic panel with Amory and President Tom Ross. And this year, it just keeps getting better and better. Now we have David Orr from Oberlin College with us as well. So what we've decided to do, rather than take questions from the audience tonight, I asked for questions previously through email, and we received a lot of great questions. I tried to put similar questions together, and we'll just go through those one at a time. We'll allow each of our panelists to respond to every question, and this isn't like a debate, so I'm not going to cut you off at any political debate. It's not that at all. We can debate. We're going to have academic discourse for sure, but I won't be cutting anybody off. Well, until the end. We'll take about 30 minutes, so we'll go a little over the time on the agenda, but I hope you guys will give me that freedom. So now, with no further ado, let's go to the first question here. And this one was really addressed to Tom, if you will, and it was about something that you mentioned in your talk a few minutes ago. President Ross, we saw your letter in the Raleigh paper last week supporting renewable energy for the UNC system and referring to the statutory limitations that act as barriers to the system's ability to implement and profit from these types of energy technologies. What do you hope will come from this letter? And then, as a follow-up, Amory and David, in what ways do you think the UNC system can be a leader in and benefit from going big in renewable energy?
Well, thank you. I think that what we hope will happen is that we'll get some attention for what we think are lots of potential ways in which we can better utilize renewables in providing the energy that we need. And as I mentioned, we're spending $225 million a year for our utilities, and if we can figure out ways to generate some of our own electricity through solar or other kinds of renewables that we're able to keep the power, then I think that is would be best for us in the long term. I think further that there are some tax incentives out there today that allow us to build public-private partnerships, which I think would allow some businesses and others to come in and invest in some of the capital that's needed to install the solar panels and other kinds of renewables, so that, again, the capital that we lack now and that we have difficulty finding ways to acquire would be available in a public-private partnership. So, I think with the right regulatory structure, we would be able to provide more of our own energy. We have lots of buildings, you might note. Most of them have roofs, thankfully. Come on, they got roofs out there. We're getting tired out there. So, and roofs can, not all of them, by the way, but many of them can handle solar arrays. We have lots of parking lots. So there are lots of flat surfaces that we have that receive sunshine on a regular basis. And we'd like to be able to better utilize that space to help support our energy needs, and we need some help from policymakers to do that.
What the issue is why take this to scale and collaborative ventures and so forth. I think what Amory just did so brilliantly was to paint a picture of a possible future. And it's so easy, as he pointed out, to give all the reasons why we can't make it. And yet we are visual creatures. Some 70% of our sensory apparatus is connected with our eyes. So we tend to believe what we can see, touch, feel, experience. The importance, it seems to me, of going to scale is taking the myth of solar and of efficiency, which is often thought to be only applicable in small scale, little household operations and so forth, or watches or handheld solar devices. And take it to the scale that it really means something that changes people's lives. So the change here is not just in beginning to make the shift to solar, it's beginning to make a shift in our mindset that says that solar is possible, that future is possible. We're trying to do this at a regional scale in the heart of the U.S. Rust Belt from Flint, Michigan to Youngstown, Ohio, and trying to get people to imagine that this region could once again be economically viable, prosperous, clean, and a driver in the economy, and a place for people, when they look for water and a temperate climate, can come to, and not as refugees, but as opportunity seekers. And so making this visible is really critically important. That's the value to me in going to scale and seeing this begin to work at an increasingly exponential rate. But the change, I think, is the most important change is really in how we think.
You may have heard that renewables can't do much without a breakthrough in cheap storage for the times when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't blow. And that is a myth. We just posted a little explanation of why at rmi.org as a YouTube video, actually 3 of them. But without going through that, the basic principle is it's like conducting a symphony orchestra. You have a good conductor and a good score, and not every instrument plays all the time, but beautiful music emerges continually. And that is the way that 4 European countries, not especially noted for hydropower, I'm not talking about Norway, last year got about half their electricity from renewables. Spain 45%, Scotland 46%, Denmark at least 47%, Portugal 58%, with better reliability than ours. In the case of Denmark and of Germany, which is a quarter renewable, 10 times better than ours. And they didn't add any bulk storage. They just learned to operate the system properly, to back up variable renewables, photovoltaics and wind, with other renewables at other times or in other places. And they didn't even do yet a lot of the flexible demand and the distributed storage, like iStorage air conditioning and smart electric vehicles that can get you to largely or wholly renewable supply with superior reliability. And speaking of, thankfully, that the roofs are here, President Ross, you may have noticed that when Superstorm Sandy came through New Jersey was the #2 state for solar power on rooftops at that time. It had over 1,000 megawatts of it installed, over 90% of which survived the storm, and even the ones that flew away with the roof were often intact when they landed, except that owing to utility policies in that place, all of them were wired in such a way that they couldn't work without the grid. Now, that's not necessary, and the utility now realizes it wasn't smart, and they want to change it. I was giving a speech in that beautiful convention center in Charlotte a couple of years ago, and they were showing us around the beautiful big photovoltaic system that covered the roof. And I noticed signs to the tornado shelter. It turned out that under the parking lot was the tornado shelter for the middle of town. So in the presence of the mayor and the owner of the manager of the facility, and I think it was the head of the city council, and a rep of the utility and the chair of the utility commission, I asked, is this place wired, this was before Sandy, is this place wired so the solar power can work even without the grid, like my house is, and like the Pentagon is requiring for its military bases? Because that would be a wonderful contribution to public safety if, at least in the daytime or all the time with a few batteries and some good efficient free lights, you could make it work even without the grid. And they said no, and I asked why. They said, well, our inverters are capable of that. It's in the hardware, but the utility doesn't allow us to activate the software. And the head of the commission turned to the utility rep and said, why? And she said, I don't know. He said, well, let me work with you to help you find out. And I got to go back and see what happened. But I think it's pretty clear after the kinds of storms we've had, and last night was no exception, that we can get terrific resilience and security and public safety benefits for all North Carolinians by a resilient grid architecture, and it turns out it doesn't even cost more.
Thank you. Great response. Okay, our second question is related because it's a distributed energy question, but it's a little more controversial of an issue. And I forgot to mention that all of these are anonymous. I'm protecting the innocent here. And it is, and we'll start with Amory on this one, but I'd love to hear all of your response. Would you consider modular nuclear reactors to be a viable option for generating steam and electricity on university campuses? And if not, why would you eliminate modular nuclear reactors from consideration as a viable source of clean energy?
Regular nuclear reactors have such an invisible, that is, there isn't any business case, that for 9 years, as of next month, they have not attracted a penny of private capital investment, even though they have enjoyed an offer of 100+% construction subsidies and bigger operating subsidies than wind power got. Now, the short reason is they cost too much. And that is why none of the 60-odd reactors anywhere in the world has been bid in a competitive market against the available alternatives. They've all been bought by central planners for an equivalent process. And the ones being built next door to you in South Carolina and in Georgia are built only because of special laws that put all of the cost and all of the risk on the customers and the federal taxpayers, while the utility builders enjoy any upside, which I doubt they will get if the plants are even finished. Now, small reactors are even less economic, typically in the literature by a factor of at least 2, because reactors don't scale down well as a matter of physics. That's why we build them big. And the promoters of the small modular reactor concept hope to overcome this by economies of mass production. But then they run smack into another kind of SMR called small modular renewables, which do scale down very well and are already decades ahead in capturing their economies of mass production. That's why in the more favorable parts of the country, solar power now sells for a little under a nickel and wind power for half that. That's cheaper than even a new combined cycle gas plant with fracked gas. So if you try to capture the economies of mass production, it takes you at least another decade to prove that it works and get a design, and probably more than that to get it licensed and try to get investment to build a bunch. And by then you're even a decade and many, many doublings further behind in catching up with the small modular renewables, not to mention efficiency, which typically saves more and costs less and is growing faster, and you never catch up. This might have been an interesting idea in the 1950s, but it's one of those future technologies whose time has passed. End of story.
Any further comments on that one?
Well, I'm tempted to make the case for it, but Amy just put a wooden stake. Amy just put a wooden stake.
Even you are not that imaginative.
Amy just drove a banana through the heart of that bead.
So I was thinking, that's an anonymous questioner,
Yes, sir.
so the responders are not necessarily anonymous, are they?
Unfortunately,
Probably
we're
not,
in the
huh?
situation we're in right now.
Yeah, so if I said something, it would be, so I guess I could start with saying this must be a campus decision. Or if it's going to take 10 years, I'll be retired, but I think instead I'll just say what he said.
very good.
I think those who feel it's a good idea should invest the money in it.
There you go.
They'll lose it, sorry, but that's one way to find out.
I like it. I'm sorry.
yeah.
President Ross,
Are you here?
taking the lead from you. I think I better get this, I'm sorry. Yes, dear. Honey, I'm a little bit busy right now. Well, I'm here facilitating this panel with President Ross and Amy Lovins and David Orr. Yeah, David Orr, he's right here. I know. You think his book is amazing, and you think all of our faculty should have it as required reading. I know.
They don't.
Ask him your question. Yes, I know your question. I'm not going to forget it. Don't worry. Okay, I'll ask him right now. Thanks. So, my wife is a big fan, David. Her question is, what are your suggestions to ensure that all students, not just our appropriate technology or sustainable development students, receive an education in sustainability? While we have an amazing reputation for producing students who major in these areas, real change requires a solid sustainable education foundation for all graduates. And by the way, she's a physics professor. And I want to follow up with also faculty. How do we bring the faculty along in other disciplines that aren't immediately recognizable within the sustainability realm?
Jeff, give me your phone. Let me talk directly to you. The question is really too big, but...
Hello?
Max Smart here.
It's a modular, bananular phone.
Well, I think this is the exciting part for those of you who are faculty administrators here. We need to, in some ways, reinvent the university. And I think the work of all of you is, in effect, doing that. And in talking about the siloization of higher education, it's been siloed because that's how the reward structure works. If you're a faculty member, you're rewarded for working in a small number of fields and publishing for a small number of like professionals, and so all the pressures are centripetal. And what Amory and Tom were talking about is a university system where the pressures are increasingly centripetal. You're drawn out of your discipline, and you've got to make connections. If you, and I said this at the noon lunch, if you dissected Amory's talk, I don't know how many disciplines you'd find, but there'd be at least a dozen or 24 disciplines mentioned in that. And I think the two things in comment. We're at the start of a large conversation about how and whether and under what terms humans survive into the future. And what Amory described is a future in which we not just survive, but we thrive. And we build a very different world. And it's no longer one that is beyond our reach. It's within our grasp to build that world. We have the technology. It's not a technological issue, I don't think. It's a leadership issue, and it's an issue of heart and hope and gumption and a bit of luck mixed in. But I think that's a different reward structure for faculty and for students, but it is a large conversation. And I think it's one in which all of us can be engaged in. I can't think of a discipline that could be exempted from that process, from classics and history and philosophy and psychology all the way through the hard sciences. It's a big conversation, and I think the leadership here and what's taking place on this campus and in others is part of that conversation. So that's one thing, and I think there's a sense of liberation. It's opening the windows and the doors of disciplines and letting ideas flow back and forth. And for students, I think the most important part is to begin to engage them in the process. And I'll just end by saying this, that 15 years ago when we did the Adam Joseph Lewis Center on the campus, we made that a class for students. So we had about 250 kids that worked for 6 months and after with people like Amory and people from NASA and so forth. And the point of doing this was to begin to get head and hands engaged, head, hands, and heart engaged in something that was real. It had consequences. And that was the start of a revolution, I think, that has taken through our campus and so forth. So I've forgotten the last part of your wife's question, but give me your number and I'll call her later.
Thank you. Any response from Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, if you think about not just the problems of sustainability and our energy and where we're going to get it and how we're going to use it, but virtually every big problem we face can't be solved by any one discipline anymore. You know, the thinking that solves problems is across disciplines, and it requires lots of people. There, you know, you look at discoveries, and I can't remember the number, but somebody told me the number of different patents inside a cell phone. The different patents that it took to make the different components of a cell phone. It's something like 20 or 25 different inventions that had to be put together by somebody and some group of people that could think across all those different inventions and see how they might work together to create the cell phone or the smartphone that we use today. So I think we have to figure out in the university not just how to develop interdisciplinary programs and how to set structures around an effort to be interdisciplinary, but we have to figure out how to engage faculty in their disciplines in a way that thinks beyond that discipline, in a way that helps their students understand the need to go beyond any particular area in looking for solutions to problems. It's not easy to do. You know, David said at lunch that it really is a reinvention almost of the way we think about education, and it's I don't have an answer, but I think it is critical to us that we take advantage of the talent of our faculty and our students by asking them to think in different ways and to think bigger. So we have work to do in this area, maybe as much or more as in any other area that might help us solve some of the problems we face.
I have two other comments, and they're kind of related. Bill Joy, who was one of the founders of Sun Microsystems, in April 2000 wrote an article in Wired magazine called "Why the Future Doesn't Need Us." And he called for, and Bill Joy is not what is conventionally called a Luddite. It's a word used by people who don't know much about Ned Ludd and so forth, but that's another matter. But he called for a moratorium on any device that we make that could self-replicate, so artificial intelligence, nanotechnologies, and genetic engineering. Now, whatever your views of those subjects may be, that was it was a brilliant article, eloquently written by a person we have to take seriously, a brilliant person. And I think that article should have been the reason why any chancellor, and this is some years ago now, but any chancellor should have read the article and said, hey, we're calling a moratorium on classes, and I'm going to give $10,000 or some such amount of money to every department, and we engage in a week-long conversation. That was worth talking about. Because what he was talking about, there are three ways that we lose our grip on the planet. One is we blow it up, that's nuclear war. The second is we wreck the planet ecologically, and that's climate change and so forth. The third is we get ourselves evicted by devices smarter than we are. And will, at some point, as Norbert Wiener said in an article in 1948, we have no good reason to believe that when they cross that threshold to sentience and to replicability, that they will be kindly disposed to us. So, you know, if we can't talk about that in higher education, where do we talk about it? It will not be in Congress, not likely to be in corporations, it probably won't be in me, at least as presently constituted. That should have been a conversation here. And then in saying that, the other point is this. This gets long-winded, but I'm on a roll now. You're not cutting me off. But anyway, there are some disciplines. Amy and I in the car this afternoon were talking about economics. Let me pick on economics for just a minute. The standard neoclassical theory, and if there are economists here, I apologize in advance, or people who are married to economists or whatever, I apologize. But the standard neoclassical view of economics would not pass muster in a physics department because it doesn't believe in the laws of entropy. If you can recalibrate economics to work with physics, it would be a very different discipline. It espouses behavior that would not work for ethical ethicists. It has a view of human nature that wouldn't work in psychology departments. It wouldn't work in the history department. So you go down the list of departments, and it advocates behavior that wouldn't work in the sociology department. So there are some disciplines that need to be rethought. With all love and all due respect, we need to rethink some things and begin to recalibrate individual disciplines that have been able to grow because of their isolation in ways that don't work or would not work if we ended silos and they had to engage in a large conversation. I once advocated that anybody who's up for tenure ought to have to come before the entire body of the university. Maybe the universe.
It'd be less expensive if we did the universe, I think.
Could be, but you talk to the legislature. And say, what do you know that's important to us? Where does your bit of knowledge fit on the topography of the university and maybe the universe? And what is dangerous about what it is that you know? And answer that publicly.
So let me,
Gentlemen, if I can interrupt for a second, Amory, I got to give you gentlemen an update. I just got a text from my 17-year-old daughter because I turned my ringer off finally, and it says, "Dad, you better get to work or I'm going to Oberlin."
so let me make my two colleagues look terribly reasonable. I think I'm become, by age 66, reasonably disciplined in learning, but in an academic sense, I'm utterly undisciplined because I don't think there is any reality about the boundaries artificially drawn through knowledge. They simply aren't there. They're imaginary. And this fiction has grown up through academic tribalism, and I'm sure it has its uses, but understanding how the world works is not really one of them. Now, so you'll understand my biases. I'm a Harvard and Oxford dropout. All my degrees are honorary. I've taught in 10 universities, but only subjects I've never formally studied because I can have beginner's mind and it's more fun. And although I'm really a recovering physicist by principal background, there was a parallel track that went chronologically: music, classics, math, linguistics, some law, a little medicine, a lot of photography. And I then started to diversify because in our line of work, you have to pick up a couple of new disciplines a year and you never know what they're going to be. But after you've done that for 30 or 40 years, everything reminds you of something. Now, let me therefore attempt to subvert the 80 students here by urging you to jump the fences, walk on the grass, be utterly uninhibited in going on to anybody's turf to learn anything you want and need to know. Because here's the great secret, in case you haven't figured it out yet, there are few, if any, disciplines that a smart and motivated person like you cannot learn as much about in 6 months as most, not all, but most people in the field know. Especially nowadays with the internet, which we didn't have, of course, when we were doing this stuff. So once you understand that, you need have no hesitation in roaming anywhere in the universe of knowledge and making new connections that haven't been made before, and that's what the world needs. We have plenty of narrow specialists who are really good in their discipline. I'm glad they're there. I'm glad they do what they do, and I'm glad I'm not one of them. Because I don't think I could have contributed very much. And therefore, I hope that our academic administrators will get over whatever restrictions they are imposing on your learning what you want to learn, which is why I dropped out of Oxford. They were wanting me to specialize too much. Will not try to protect you from exuberantly transdisciplinary impulses by trying to put you in a box. Get out of the box. There is no box.
You know, Jeff, were there a defender of disciplines and academic normality here, they would point out that if Amory had had a PhD, he might have grown bigger bananas than this.
but not tastier.
Okay, before we digress further, here's a more, practical question for you. And this one's addressed to Tom Ross, President Ross. Under Senate Bill 668, the UNC system was given a target to achieve a 30% reduction by 2015 based on 2002-2003 fiscal year, as well as required to submit an annual strategic energy plan report with strategies for consumption reductions. The new Senate Bill 38 states that the strategic energy plans will be required every other year and does not address the continuance of reduction goals past 2015. Through the efforts of the Appalachian Energy Summit and North Carolina Energy Leadership Challenge, the UNC system has become a national leader and model for addressing concerns regarding our energy future. Yet the North Carolina legislature seems to be moving in the opposite direction. Is this matter being discussed at a higher level? And what can we do as part of the Energy Summit, Energy Leadership Challenge movement to address this concern?
Well, it's obviously being discussed regularly, but, I think there are advantages for legislators to set goals for us. There's no question about that. I think the 30% reduction goal was really very helpful at the time because it focused the university on conservation in a way that it hadn't been before. I don't know if every one of our campuses is going to get there by 2015, but we're going to be pretty close. As you heard me say, we've saved a significant amount already, and I think we're focused on meeting that goal. Would it be helpful to have a goal beyond that? I think it's always helpful because people change, leaders change, that sort of thing. People's interest and focus changes. On the other hand, I think we have become so institutionalized in our approach to looking for ways to do things better and to conserve, that if we don't have a goal, we're not going to stop. So I think you shouldn't think that we're going to quit working because, we don't have a goal anymore, so we don't have to do this. I think that, and frankly, I think reporting every 2 years is okay as well because, we spend a lot of time and energy doing reports that we could spend working on energy conservation. So, I think that there are times when reporting something that's moving the needle is not as rapid as you might think. Reporting it every 2 years is probably okay. So I'm not too concerned about the bill itself. What I think I worry about is the commitment to continued focus on energy conservation. My bigger concern, for example, is there was discussion this year in the legislature, and again, we don't have a budget yet, so this isn't over, about not allowing us to keep our energy savings. Well, that's part of the incentive that causes us to do what we do, is we get to keep the savings and reinvest that in our university. And so those kind of incentives are very important, and I would very much hate to see those go away. That's much more important than telling me, here's your goal. Because, our goal is to not stop at 30% or 40% or 50%. Our goal is to listen to Amory's world of the future and try to help get there. So we don't need somebody to set some artificial goal. We're going to work to do what's right. But incentives do matter, and they do help. And the ability to keep our savings really matters because that gives us funds that we can reinvest. So those are the places where I hope this group will help us. And I think we need this group's help in keeping a focus on those things that are the most important here.
It might be useful to quote the lessons from the United States Navy, which had some years of a very successful energy efficiency effort where the skippers were allowed to keep the savings for whatever they thought were the highest priorities on their ship, and they saved like mad. And then somebody thought, this is a disciplined organization. We don't need incentives. We just need orders. They cut out the incentives. The savings went away. They brought back the incentives. The savings returned.
Yeah. I mean, if it was all about orders, then Man, this would be easy, because I'd just issue some orders, you know? I spent 17 years as a judge. I know how to give orders. What I hadn't figured out is how to make people follow them.
Jeff, one comment here. I think the elephant in the room on a question like that, so to speak, is the political system is broken. In 1978, I think it was, Amory and I went to visit Jim Hunt, the governor of North Carolina at that time. And nothing said or no research since really has changed the fundamental fact that efficiency, as Amory pointed out in 1976 and before, is always cheaper, better, easier, smarter than anything else we can do on the production side. That's just the hard fact of the matter. The political system was unable to hear the message. We've been overwhelmed by money. Citizens United has corrupted the democratic process in ways that we don't know yet the end of it. But there was nothing about, we know better than we act. And we've known for a long time the environment is worth protecting. Future generations had every right to have our benevolence and actions on their behalf. We know that there was no reason not to protect soils, forests, climate stability, all of these things. We had the wherewithal to do it. The reason we didn't do it was the political system has been broken, corrupted, co-opted. And I think the issue, Amory's future, and I am a political scientist, that's just truth and disclosure, but or I'm a defunct political scientist, but the fact is that to get to that future where we come together to make common decisions, it is not just the marketplace, it will be the political marketplace. And you and I are citizens on one side, we're consumers on the other. Our buying power can move a whole lot of things, but eventually the decisions that we will have to make about a lot of things we will have to make collectively. And if we're going to be, if Amory's vision of democracy is functional again, we're going to have to take it back. And I don't know any easy way to do that. We've got to evict money from the process. We've got to restore integrity of the media. We've got to do all of those kinds of things. But we're in a bind in Ohio, the way you are here and all across the country, for political reasons. We allowed the politics to become corrupted. And that's probably all I'm going to say on that. But that's a large conversation. I do not think that we can avoid that eventually.
Certainly has the best government money can buy.
Well, we're running out of time. We have time for one more question. And since I'm facilitating, I think I should get a little bit of leeway in asking a question, don't you? Is that okay? Why? Because I have a microphone, that's why, Jed. So, one more question, and it follows along, a lot of what we've talked about today. Amory's given us this great vision of what the future can be, and it's very inspiring for us. And David's talked a lot about we have to rethink, and we have to include all disciplines, and reinvent the academic system. And President Ross inspires us by giving us the support to do so, and is truly behind us, here publicly, privately, all the time, behind us. So we're very inspired as we leave here this evening, and we're ready for 2 full days of work to do some good, to make some things happen, to apply some things. So help us frame where we are now. We have lots of disciplines in the room. I hope we didn't offend any of them, but we have lots of them in the room. And in fact, what I just described, we have this fantastic 3 experts here that see things from different perspectives. It's true that you agree on a lot of things, but you see them from different perspectives. That's very important. We want to truly collaborate like that. And true collaboration is really hard to do. So please, give us some closing comments on where we should go in the next 2 days, and especially related to some applied, realistic goals we can reach together as a system, collaborating together as a system. David, just like you talked about the Rust Crescent up there that you're working with, you're bringing that region together. We want to bring our whole state together in the same way. Let's start with President Ross.
Okay. The first thing I think I would say is that to recognize not everybody in the room is in the same place. Not every institution's in the same place. Some institutions are further down the road, have done more work, have learned more things than some of the other institutions. Some institutions have more resources than others to try some pilots, to take risks, to do some things that other institutions don't have the resources available to them to allow those kinds of efforts. So, that means that the responsibility lies with all of you to share who you are and where you are, and to understand that it's okay maybe not to be as far down the path in one way as another institution. You may be further down a different path. So that's why it's so important to share among yourselves what you are doing. And as I said earlier, a lot's changed just in the last 2 years since we've been doing this summit. A lot of work has already happened. But there are also a lot of new technologies and a lot of new opportunities that some of you may have heard about and others haven't. So I would challenge you to, first of all, share. Because when you leave here, if you don't know more than when you came, then you haven't talked to enough people, because I promise you there's somebody here that knows some things you don't that could help you in your work. So I think that's really important. The other thing I would ask you to do is do what we're having to do at the public university more and more, and that is look for ways we can work not just intra-institution, but inter-institutionally. What can we do with other institutions? And that may be with other colleges and universities in our community or in our region, but it may be with other enterprises, other public enterprises. What can you do with the county? What can you do with the city government? Are there places where you can work together to be more efficient and to look for conservation measures that where you can invest together and reduce your investment but produce better outcomes for a community? So I think trying to think innovatively outside of just the institution in which you find yourself working. And what else can you do with another university or a community college or a county or city government or other public entity, and what kind of private partnerships can you build to help do your work? I think those are areas that we still can make lots of progress in. So I would urge you to do those. But more than anything, I think I would ask you to do what I'm going to do, which is to try to imprint in my brain, and I'm probably going to have to get a copy of it from Amory and read it again, but imprint in my brain what he said, what that vision really does look like. Because as David said, if I can't connect it to my eyes and to what I really am looking at when I'm looking at the future, I'm not going to be able to dream it as effectively as I need to be. So I ask you to help me in capturing what he said and not forgetting it, and believing it's possible, and working for ways to head us in that direction.
That was great. Thanks for that. Two other comments by way of footnote. The great Jewish rabbi Abraham Heschel said that the world would fail not because of any kind of economic or technical reason, but for lack of appreciation. And I once gave a talk at Oberlin. It was a baccalaureate talk, and it was on gratitude. And I said at the end of the talk, I asked people to go to somebody in the room, it was an auditorium about this size, and find somebody to whom they owed a debt of gratitude and say thank you for it. And I thought that might take 5 minutes. It was a way to get me off the hook at the end of a talk and make a graceful exit. And you know what happened? It went on for about 15 or 20 minutes, and I had to finally break it off. And I think that we suffer a good bit in this movement because people feel unappreciated. So as you go about your work, find somebody to whom you owe a debt. It can be all kinds of debt, personal or intellectual. I owe Amory a huge debt for, he's been my mentor on certain energy issues and lots more, in Tom for his leadership and inspiration. So I owe debts to many of you in this room. The other thing is, I don't see how we make it to a decent future unless we learn to laugh at ourselves. We need a sense of humor. Now, that's not a funny way to say that, but if we're not laughing, we're not taking the situation seriously enough. And so this needs to be something like a party and a celebration. We need to find the ridiculous in human affairs, and Lord knows there's no shortage of that. Just consider Congress Exhibit A here for a moment. But those are two things, gratitude and a sense of humor, the capacity to laugh at our own pomposity and puffed upness and so forth. And I think that goes a long way. It's what Amy referred to in his remarks as the spirit about which we, or with which we do our work.
I would just like to add something else that I learned from our friend and neighbor, Bill Joy, whom David quoted. David and his brother, by the way, cut the roof beams under which these bananas were grown. So we've been unindicted co-conspirators for about 40 years, but I look up at those beams and bless your name every morning. Let's see. So Bill Joy said, and it turns out this was also ascribed earlier to President Eisenhower when he was still general, but it isn't clear whether he said it. If you can't solve the problem, make it bigger. If you can't solve a tough problem, enlarge it. Normally we try to cut a tough problem into smaller bite-sized pieces, but that loses the connectivity we need. And what you really need to do is move the boundaries out until they encompass everything the solution requires. So we get more options, more synergies, more degrees of freedom. That is, again, a revolt against the narrow silos system that our current academic structures like to enforce. I was talking to a student who's sitting right here earlier tonight about what he's studying, and as I recall, he said political science and biology with a minor in Native American cultural anthropology. And I said somewhat jocularly, well, that's a really good start, and if you threw in Chinese art history and thermodynamics or something, you'd be even better. And he said, well, actually, I have studied Chinese history and took a physics course. So I think this is moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Will you all please join me in thanking our great panelists again? I would just like to say that I think the audience would agree with me that we all owe the three of you a huge debt of gratitude. We thank you very much. Thanks for your fantastic comments. I want to give a couple of logistic things before we say goodnight. Tomorrow morning, everybody, all the participants, please remember that we have breakfast at 7:30 tomorrow morning, 7:30 to 8:15, so don't be late or you won't get much food. It's in the Plymouth Student Union in the Parkway Ballroom, which I believe, I always get these wrong, is the top floor, is that right? The fourth floor of the new section of the Plymouth Student Union. And then immediately following that at 8:45, we will be in Rosen Concert Hall, which is on River Street, for the plenary session that starts at 8:45 and goes till noon. So we look forward to seeing you all tomorrow, working very hard to build solutions together. Thank you again. Have a great night.